Christina is really like the valedictorian of Hitler's Aryan race masterclass. Like she is not to be trusted. I don't know why Rihanna's music is being associated with her. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is your boy Jabbar, the Kakashi Cowboy, back with another video. Another installment of Lovecraft Country, episode 4 I think it is. Episode 5 will come out tomorrow because I'm doing this video on Saturday. So we start off this episode with Montrose opening up the episode. He is drinking. We hear some auditory flashbacks, sounds of people screaming and yelling at each other. And he's kind of, pacing back and forth in the room, laying down. And I think we're supposed to sort of recognize this moment as post-traumatic stress. Then the final scene of that first opening scene is of him reading actually the Ancient Order of the Dawn's book that he took from the Braithwaite house. He reads the first page. It says something to the effect of like, Adam named Eve fucked. He throws the book into the trash can. He pours his liquor that he's been drinking on it, and then he sets it on fire. And he says it smells like Tulsa, which I really took note of. To me, I hope that that's just not like a throwaway line, but it seemed to be to me also indicating that he's also dealing with past racial trauma as well. I hope that isn't just like a throwaway line, that he actually was there during Tulsa and that'll come back up later as a part of his backstory. We've gotten a little bit about how he was abused as a child. His father, there was some allusions to the fact that his father thought that he was gay. Because he liked to read science fictions and, fantasy stories. So Montrose is dealing with familial trauma, he's dealing with racial trauma, and he's dealing with the current trauma of just watching his brother die previously. And he's really kind of going insane, a little bit crazy. Also, we hear the newscaster on the radio talking about the Soviet Union and how they're closing in on the Soviets. The next scene that we actually get after this is of Christina. So Christina is driving along. She's driving actually to Letitia's house, the house that she got for her to be in, because it's all a part of her master plan. And she drives up and she's driving along real fast, not even paying attention to the speed limit. Nobody's stopping her. No cops are stopping her or nothing like that. And as she is going along, Rihanna's "Bitch Better Have My Money" is playing, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I really did not like this scene. Why are we equating this racist white woman with sort of like, Rihanna's music of like, I'm a bad bitch and all this other stuff? Christina is really like the valedictorian of Hitler's Aryan race masterclass. Like she is not to be trusted. I don't know why Rihanna's music is being associated with her. I don't like it. I don't like the associations made there with the song. I also don't like the fact that we're using contemporary music in this episode either. Like it really kind of started to annoy me. Like we kept getting contemporary like rap and pop and the latter sort of mixed in here, and I really think the piece should stick to it should really stick to like the music of that day and of that time period, especially when the music of the time is like jazz, blues, and all this other stuff. We even see Ruby, she constantly is singing like these jazzy, bluesy, songs. So why are you then accompanying, like it's just a mismatch. It just feels off to me. Where Christina is driving to Letitia's house to essentially pull up on her and like do this divisive shit. So she pulls up to Letitia's house where she starts like doing this whole white woman I'm in danger shit. Like, oh my goodness, Tick, he just tried to kill me. Tick, you shouldn't trust the men. You shouldn't trust the men. And it's just like, girl, you just sat by and watched Letty get shot. Like, you set her up to get shot and killed and everything. Like, you've been setting her up to put her in danger. You put her in this house so that she could have to deal with white racist ghosts. Like, you like, and it's just so, like, I feel like this is an underlying critique of white women still, though. That they will do this funny shit where they won't even have to get their hands dirty. They don't even have to get their hands dirty. Like, they just get everybody else to do their dirty work. They're still committing racial violence and like violence, but they don't ever get their hands dirty and actually kill anybody. They get everybody else to do it. So she sets Tick up to kill her father. She sets, Letitia up to kill the white ghost to get him out of the house so that she could make. She thought she was gonna walk up in, the house without any problems, but she forgot that the hoodoo lady's magic. She put a hex on it, and so no evil wizardry or whatever can come in, and so she gets stopped. She literally just tries to walk in the fucking house like without even saying hello or nothing, like not even asking if I can come in or nothing. She just literally tries to walk in the house like she's gonna walk, like she owns the place, and like she gets stopped and she's like, oh shit. And then she tries to put on this whole white woman act. Girl, the women empowerment. Women empowerment. Letty, thank God, is not falling for it. She's like, bitch, get the fuck out of here. She slams the door in her face. She does figure out that, oh, you set me up again. Like, not only did you set me up to get killed the first time, but you set me up again to get this house. You set me up again to get this house, which has also caused a rift between her and her sister now. So now we get these white people, like she's being manipulative and she's like pitting black people against each other. And that's also how, systemic racism works, is that white racism works, is that it pits black people against each other. It does cut to a scene of Hippolyta and her daughter Dee. Hippolyta took the machine, the solar system, the planet that had the planets on it, out of the house. She's talking to her dad on the phone about how, the planets work and how she can get this machine to work. He doesn't really have any answers for her. The machine should be able to predict the locations of different, planets at different times. And she asks essentially, can a solar system have more than two suns? And he's like, I guess so. I guess, it's never really been found out before, but sure, possibly. Her father also tells her it sounds like she's talking about the recent comic that her daughter Dee has been working on, which I find very interesting. I feel like that is foreshadowing for something to come later, that Hippolyta is going to go on her own sort of little journey and adventure to sort of figure out a way to get a key to open up this machine. We see her daughter Dee, Diana, and also Emmett Till, who was called Bobo. If you didn't know, Emmett Till's nickname was Bobo. And they're playing and they're best friends. I'm really interested in the fact that Bobo keeps showing up after scenes where like there's racial violence. So we get this scene with Christina sort of playing this like, oh, I'm a delicate little white woman, please help me, Letty, please help me. And then the next scene is like Bobo and Dee playing together and going to his house, and it's almost like a reminder that also I feel like it's an underlying reminder, and it's done subtly, where like Christina again, like she's doing this little insidious shit, like the woman who got Carolyn, I forget her name, Carolyn Bryant or something like that, Carolyn Bryant, who was the one who told, the white man that, Bobo Emmett Till was harassing her. Like, she didn't get her hands dirty. Like, she didn't have to get her hands dirty to get that boy killed. It's like almost a reminder that, this bitch, she could do some damage. Like, she might not get her hands physically dirty, but she is capable of killing everybody. The next scene we sort of get is Christina again. So then we get another scene of Christina after that, of Christina playing like hide and seek with these little white kids in the neighborhood. And the white boy, what I found very interesting about this scene was the white boy essentially says, she's not really even hiding. Like, all the other kids are hiding from the boy who's been tagged it. And he has to go and try to tag somebody else. And Christina isn't hiding. Like, she's just sort of out in the open, like, try to catch me if you can. And then, she's like, the little boy says, have you even played hide and go seek before? You're playing it completely wrong. But then we see two police officers who actually work for the white police chief, who was working with the Winthrop guy to, do the experimentations on those black people in the house. And, we see them come and, take Christina into custody. And I really like that scene, that is subtly sort of said that Christina isn't really playing, she's not really hiding. Like, Christina is out in the open, letting everybody know what letting out, and she's sort of hiding out in the open. She's not really, she wants to get caught. she wants to get found out. This is a part of her plan. This is also a part of her character. She doesn't really, this idea that Christina is hiding away out somewhere and, isn't letting it be known where she's at and what she's doing. She's letting everybody know, and she wants to get caught. Just like she wants to get caught by this white police chief. And she wants to get caught and taken into custody and brought back to his sort of headquarters. And she does. Police chief was always trying to get into the order. He wanted to get into the order. We figured that out between their conversation. And Christina's sort of playing coy with him a little bit, not letting him know the entire information. Like, she's like, I didn't know you were letting Negroes live in your neighborhood now and in your district now. That's interesting. That she's sort of like egging him on and trying to like pick at him a little bit, saying that he's sort of losing his touch and losing his step, and like he's losing also his power. And she's also kind of sort of flexing her muscles a little bit. He sort of is like, you didn't get your introduction into the into the order either, you little cunt or whatever. And like we're seeing the sexism play out. But it's like we still see she's still willing to work with this guy. Like she's still going to work with this guy. She's still going to work with these racist white people. She's still going to use them to her advantage and these white men. Like, she just got done telling Letty not to work with Tick or not to trust him. But she's literally going and she's shaking the hands of white racist Klansmen police cops to sort of work with them to sort of get whatever she wants done. We move on to the next sort of scenes being Tick and Letitia in the South Side. It says South Side Library of Chicago or something like that. And she goes in there looking for Tick, who's trying to do some studying up on the Braithwaites and where these pages might be found. There's this little boy who is holding a book. There's an Easter egg. There's a little boy holding a book of Journey to the Center of the Earth. This, of course, is foreshadowing because this whole episode is very Journey to the Center of the Earth. Letitia's trying to convince Tick to let us help. We need to figure out what's going on. You're not letting me know information because you're on this whole big ass macho man type shit bullshit about how you're going to protect everybody. Like, you were actually planning to leave right after you killed Christina. You weren't even going to let me know anything about what's going on or nothing like that. Like, we're supposed to be friends. Also they slept together as well. So they're a little bit more than friends. He looks in the book after she's gone, and Montrose's name is in the book because he has been at the library studying it, just like Letitia told him he had, just like he is. So we are getting some parallelism between like father, like son, breaking generational curses. Tick trying to be better than his father. We even get at the end of this episode, Montrose telling his son Tick that he grew up to be a better man in spite of him, even though they are kind of alike and paralleling each other throughout this entire episode, and actually throughout this entire season. The way that they just behave and act, they have been paralleling each other. But we get a scene where they're heading back to Sammy's bar. Letitia and Montrose are already there, so Letitia already decided to go and ask Montrose for help. Then they had this whole discussion. Montrose is trying to convince them to let it go. He finally caves in. He's also letting it be known in the scene, we're like the Reds and the Soviets in this situation. Like, everybody's coming after us, and we're going to have like all these guns and different 34 lodges coming after us. He actually let it slip that there are 34 lodges or 34 different, I guess you want to call them, maybe I don't want to call them precincts or different subsections of the Order of the Dawn. So they just got rid of one, but there's like 34 others or 33 others. So they could possibly have like 34, a whole army, closing in on them and coming after them. They're the Reds in the situation. So going back to that first scene where he's listening to the newscaster talking about how they're closing in on the Soviets and the Reds and all that stuff. So, and he says, we're like the enemy. We're the enemy in this country. And I thought that was so powerful. Like, we're like the enemy in this country, and everybody is gunning for us. And you feel that way all the time as a black person in America. Like, nobody, you have no friends. All you guys have are each other. And I really feel like that message needed to be pushed a little bit more I feel like it was pushed in terms of togetherness as we get into later scenes when they have to depend on each other to get through sort of these booby traps as they go on their Journey to the Center of the Earth, Indiana Jones, Goonies adventure. We're also getting the fact that Montrose is very intelligent and very smart. I feel like we're also getting a lot of foil, like a foil between him and Uncle George. He's sort of taken the spot of Uncle George, but he doesn't necessarily act in the same loving, compassionate way. He's just as smart as Uncle George. He's just as capable as Uncle George, but he lacks the courage that Uncle George had. I really like that throughout the scene as well that Michael K. Williams is playing with Montrose. They have to ask Hippolyta to borrow her car. That is the next scene, is them packing up, Hippolyta's car. You see her and Dee, they're like, well, we'll go with you, essentially. We'll go with you because I want to show Dee the sort of planetarium at this museum. It has one of the greatest planetariums ever that shows you the stars and the comets and the skies. We see Seymour, the guy who was talking about how he had sex with Letty. He needs a ride too, because he's heading that way as well. And Hippolyta says, sure, you can come on in. We see Hippolyta is, she's close to, like, Hippolyta is her intuition is tingling, like her spidey senses are tingling. She sees them acting weird. She knows that they're not telling her the truth. Again, like, I know something's up. That's why I'm going on this trip for real, because I want to see where y'all are going. And she also invites, pettily, she invites Seymour with them, even though she knows that they don't want any more people going with them. We get to the museum back in Boston, and we get this interaction with Seymour and Tick. Actually, they're looking for where possibly Braithwaite's Titus Braithwaite's vault might be, where he might be hiding the paper. We see Montrose. He says he's met somebody, a security guard, or he knows somebody, like this black security guard who works in the museum. He goes off with him to sort of talk about some business. I hope this is going to come up later about what they were talking about and what he was doing. They go down some steps into this like secluded area. Also, this is also juxtaposed to the fact that Seymour is now like alluding to the fact Letty tells Seymour that Chick told her essentially that he told me that you made up a lie about us and how we were together. He actually makes this very corny joke to Letty talking about you know why they call me Tree, because most men usually have two legs, but I have Tree. It's very corny. But Seymour was always corny to me, even in that scene, the house party scene where he comes in and he's talking about how him and Letitia used to fool around and stuff like that. He just comes across as a very corny ass nigga. That's just what he always did to me. Like, I was like, who is this corny ass nigga and why is he here? But he's here to sort of further this sort of underlying homophobia within the black community. That is sort of his purpose. He confronts Tick about talking to Letitia about how they used to sleep with each other, how he told, I guess he was like, why did you go and tell her, and he also alludes to the fact that he thinks that Tick is gay and that Tick got it from his daddy or got it from his dad, that he was also gay. So there is this like underlying tension here where like somehow being into comics, being into astrology, being into science fiction, and being into reading books somehow is equated to gayness or homosexuality. I don't really, it's a little weird to me. It's also helpful that the fact that they are friends with Sammy, who is actually a homosexual, who is actually gay, and is openly gay and owns the bar in town, that they are friends, are personal friends of his. I think that also helps me a little bit with the stretch of the imagination, that these things on top of it are just sort of excuses for why they might be gay for a lot of other people like Seymour, but also the fact that he even says that he knows that he's friends with Sammy and all this stuff, and then the fact that we get that Montrose leaving with this other security guard man, going down these steps to a secluded area, even though he's just going to go get information from him. It's also alluded with the juxtaposition of that scene that, they're going to go do some gay stuff or whatever, they're going to go have sex. And so, because, Seymour looks off to the side and looks off to him going off with the other guy, and he's like, yeah, I know about y'all or whatever. Tick tries to ignore him at first, but Seymour persists, and then he says the thing about I ain't no sissy. And then he even looks at his dad funny, going off to the side with the man during this moment as well. So I don't know if he thinks that his father is gay too. I felt like they were sort of hinting on that again, the toxic masculinity, the macho manness that Tick is portraying here, the fact that he's sort of like defending himself against this very ridiculous accusation of, gayness, even though gayness shouldn't be like an insult to anybody, but people still use that as an insult. We get Ruby. We see Ruby try and go for the job. She goes into the Marshall store where there's a whole bunch of white people. It's a very high-end store. We also get this another scene with more contemporary music. She thinks she's about to go get the job, and then she sees the other black lady in the store working there already. and she knows immediately. She gets a little jealous. She knows they're only gonna hire one black girl to work in that store, and that now it's not gonna be her. We see in the previous scene before we get to William at the bar with Ruby, who's sort of pouring her heart out about her frustration. He is seen beating up the police officers who have been following Christina Braithwaite. He meets them at in the driveway, and he says, he beats them up and says, you go back and tell your chief that Miss Braithwaite doesn't like people following her, especially at night and all this other stuff. And then he says, I have a date to go to, and we go see him with Ruby. He meets her. He knows exactly where she's going to be. And we're getting like white people coming in between black people, black families, black friendships. Clearly, Christina and William, a lot of people have speculated that they might be the same person, that they were the same person it turned out to be in the books. They're never seen in this. I already sort of picked up on this in the first episode. If you go back and watch my other videos, that they're never in the same area together or in the same scene together. Like it's either Christina or it's William. They're never seen with each other. And they look very alike. So people are already speculating, because based off of the book by Matt Ruff, that Christina and William are the same person. But it is Christina sort of, transforming herself and shape-shifting into a man. I'm assuming to become, or to be, so that she can sort of masquerade as a man to sort of infiltrate the Order of the Ancient Dawn, because, they don't allow women. I think that's why. I think this is also probably Christina's claim to fame as a secret spell that she created for herself, a shape-shifting spell. That might be interesting. It might come up later, but people are already speculating about the fact that they might be the same person. William says he has a hot date to go to. He goes and meets Ruby at the bar, at Sammy's bar. We're back at Sammy's bar again. And she is sort of, singing this very folksy blues song about, nobody knows her pain and her struggle. And then she also goes to talking to William. And, William actually comes up to her. And she's like, listen, I already know what this is about. I've been here many times before, which I knew already they were going to sleep together from the beginning. Like, when she said that, like, I've met white boys like you that just talk all this sweet shit into my ear just to get me in bed and promise me the world, and you're not the first white man I've been with. I knew, even though she says it ain't gonna happen, I already knew she was gonna sleep with him, because one, she's getting drunker and drunker so her inhibitions are coming down. Two, she's in a really vulnerable place because she was trying her best to get that job at Marshall. She actually starts complaining about how she let Letitia distract her, that if she had been there the day before and all this other stuff, she would have gone to it. She also starts talking about, like, it comes across as very crabs in a barrel to me. Even, references this idea that black people were always in a rat race to the finish, just to get, white people's crumbs, essentially. Ruby already has a very, it's very respectability, politics, outlook on life that, if she's respectable, if she wears certain type of clothes, if she dresses a certain type of way, if she carries herself a certain type of way, that she'll get to where she's at. And we see her hit her head up against the wall every time. Like Ruby, respectability, politics, and fighting for white people's crumbs. Baby girl, it's not going to help you get nowhere. But we see, of course, William is coming as her, white knight in shining fucking armor to sort of not only I think they're trying to get their way into the house because, Christina couldn't get her way into the house because there was a protection spell around it that the hoodoo lady put on it. And now we see William trying to get in, literally. We see him trying to get into Ruby's pants so he can get into Ruby's house, because they are looking for the time machine, essentially. They're looking for the papers that Winthrop left behind. They're also looking for the time machine that Winthrop left behind as well. This also leads back to, Christina makes mention of this when she's in the police station with the police officer. She says, essentially making fun of him, that he wasn't able to find or locate, his papers, or, get Winthrop to tell him where the time machine was. And I'm assuming, this is my prediction, that the time machine that she's referencing here is the machine that Hippolyta has at her shop, Uncle George's shop, and the one that she's trying to find a key to unlock it. I feel like Uncle George is going to come back. I feel like there's going to be I feel like there's going to be, she's going to find the key. I feel like Hippolyta's going to find the key to the time machine. I feel like she's going to go back in time, and I feel like she's going to figure out not only what happened to George, but also save him. And I feel like Uncle George, she's going to sort of reverse what has happened. I feel like that's going to be instrumental into Uncle George coming back alive. We see, William, he sort of coaxes, Ruby into sleeping with him. We're not really, he doesn't really have to do that. He doesn't do that much talking at all. We already kind of know Ruby's going to sleep with him in the first place. We see them having sort of rough sex. He pushes her, or she pushes him up against the stairwell, rips open his shirt. He has these markings on his shirt. I feel like they're going to come back around to mean something. I wonder if they're the spell. If it is true that Christina and William are the same person, I wonder if that is the spell that she like writes into her or engraves into her, to turn her into a man. If not, I'm also wondering if they're going to do this whole thing where Christina possibly created William as well. I feel like they could go many different directions that doesn't exactly harp on the book's mythology, based off of Matt Ruff's imagination. But I feel like those markings on they kind of make a snake shape, which is interesting. I feel like snakes are a reoccurring image that are coming through in this piece as well, in this series. The idea of the snake as a trickster, as a sly sort of animal, will trick you into doing things that you wouldn't necessarily do. I feel like that's what the snakes are representing in sort of in this series. But we'll see. We'll continue to see how the snakes sort of unfold as we go along. But we see Ruby, push him down, and they have sex and rough sex pretty much. We see also he pushes her hand up against, like, I think it's like a lamp. She breaks the lamp. Her hand starts bleeding. He then, licks her hand, licks the blood from her hand, and then they start kissing and then having sex. And then I really felt like this was alluding back to when the rough sex that Tick and Letty had back in the last episode, episode 3, where Tick sort of has this rough sex with Letty, and then when he's done, or when he pumps, he does like 2-3 pumps. He moves his hand in her dress, and it's blood on it because he like popped her cherry because she was a virgin, but he doesn't lick it though. So we get Tick. It's almost like it seems like a blood ritual, essentially, like a binding spell type of thing. Like we get this juxtaposition, like he doesn't like lick his hand on the blood or nothing like that. He just sort of wipes his hand off. But in this scene, we get William eating, like licking her blood and sucking her blood. I feel like there was some type of magical binding spell done literally between William and Ruby, but that same binding spell is loosely being alluded to with Letty and Tick when the blood, of course, comes from her virginity being taken. That they will forever be binded and one in a union, him and Letty. But now magically, William and Ruby will forever be binded together as well. I wish they would also get into, with Ruby and Letitia, they would get into more colorism. I feel like they're leaving it hanging out there. I hope that we get into it later on down the road, or sometime in the next episode, or maybe the episode after that. But I feel like it's just sort of hanging out there and it's not really being spoken about, the colorism that's going on between the juxtaposition of Letty, who is light-skinned, they also have sisters, and then Ruby as well. I really love the scene with Hippolyta and Dee sitting in the planetarium looking at the stars, looking at the replica of the stars. Hippolyta tells her daughter, essentially, look at that comet right there. You know what it's called? It's called Hera's Chariot. I actually named it. It was named after me. And Dee is like, really? How did you do that? And she was like, she was a part of this sort of science program back in the day. She was the only colored girl sort of a part of this science program. We already know that sort of like Hippolyta is very smart. All of these characters are really, really smart. Their intelligence, I love the fact that their intelligence shines through in these episodes, that they are not stupid, that they are not dumbfounded and like, oh, I had no idea. I don't know. So many times in horror films, so many of the characters have to play dumb in order for us to believe the horror that is going on. And in this horror series, this cosmic horror fantasy series, none of the characters have to play stupid in order for us to believe that that horror actually happens. With Hippolyta and Dee, and she's telling her about how she was the only colored girl in the science program, and that this white woman, again, this is also alluding back to Christina again. I feel like there are subtle digs being made about Christina throughout this episode. You know, that essentially the white girl who was the daughter of this very famous astrologist or scientist, you know, she got the credit for coming up with the name. Hippolyta didn't get, even though it was named, she named it, and it was named after her, Harris Chariot, the comet. You know, the white girl got the credit instead. And I feel like that is alluding back to Christina. Christina, of course, is the daughter of a famous, you know, white man in magic. The idea that, you know, Christina is also trying to use these black people to sort of get her name in there as well. Like, she's trying to, like, use Letty, use Ruby, you know, use these black women also to sort of, you know, add to her own prestige. She tells, you know, her mother essentially, why didn't you let other people know? Why didn't you let other people know this? And, you know, Hippolyta says, you know, it's enough that I know it. You know, we know the truth. And then Dee yells out, hey, you know, my mama named Harriet Harris Chariot. It was named after her. And then Dee, you know, looks at her mother, because they're both on the ground looking up at the sky, looking at the planetarium, and she says, you know, now they know it too. You know, now they know it too. And I really felt like that was a very powerful scene for me. This idea, no, it's not just enough that we know the truth, that we as black people know the truth of what happened to us and what we did. No, we deserve fucking credit, and we deserve for our names to be on our intellectual property and our achievements and our discoveries, whether they be scientific or artistic or whatever. We deserve our names to be beside that. No, it's not just enough that we, you know the truth. We also should be benefiting off of the fact that we created this shit and now other people are making money off of it. And I feel like that's also in juxtaposition to the fact that we go through this museum. We see Tick, Montrose, and Letitia moving through this museum, and the white lady behind them, the white lady tour guide, again, white women, is talking about all the Braithwaite's discoveries and all this other great shit that he did. You know, she uses the language, she uses this very violent erasure, like this violent erasure type of language, where she talks about how Braithwaite, you know, how he collected his artifacts from these indigenous people. He got them because he taught these savages, like sort of, he traded with them sort of his knowledge, his great white knowledge. No, this bitch ass nigga stole them. Like, that's what it was. They're really like white people's like racist, racial violent scrapbooks. Like, that's what museums are. They are like white people's racist scrapbooks. We see at nighttime, Tick and Letitia and Montrose, you know, go and they break into the museum at night because they think they have a sort of a lead on where the tunnel or where the vault might be. It's under this Braithwaite statue of him with these alligators sort of swimming around him. There's this light sort of shining on it that comes through, and it sort of hits this piece that sort of is the, like, there's like I guess it's like a little switch that opens up to a tunnel underneath the statue. I really was getting we were getting Journey to the Center of the Earth. To get Letty to go across the plank, Montrose tells this sort of fake story about how, you know, they tie a rope around each other. And Montrose makes up this fake story about how, you know, because Letitia asks, are you sure this knot is going to hold me? And Montrose makes up this fake story about how his great-great-grandfather, who was a slave, you know, he had to keep the horses or the cattle tied together, and if they ever got loose, that they were going to be beat by their masters. And so she best well believe that this, you know, this knot that they've created, that, you know, his grandfather came up with, you know, is going to hold because he had to, it held cattle together. Tick says, you know, the Freemans were never slaves. And she's like, and then Montrose is like, well, they got it across the goddamn plank, didn't it? Sort of fake folk tales and these passed on traditions of telling stories possibly being made up, but to also give us encouragement and courage. We see this all the time with like John Henry and Annie Christmas and all these other fables. Letitia also sort of sets Tick straight on the fact that, he's not the only one that's being affected by all of this, and he needs to stop with this whole toxic masculine macho man bullshit. Like, they're very capable of taking care of themselves. That they're just trying to fucking help because their lives also depend on this as well. Their lives are also being affected, and it's not all just up to him. He can't just do it all by himself and think that they're just going to sit by on the sidelines and watch. Also, that's just not Letitia, who Letitia is. And then, of course, him and his father, Montrose, have a conversation about love and how to love a woman. I thought it was a very intimate moment, and a very nice moment where they have a very real conversation. They run into Letitia actually ends up screaming because she runs into a man that is dead and just sort of floating along the river or the water. And she says that essentially it might be one of her neighbors. They think that it is one of the neighbors who's actually probably looking for a secret passageway to the Braithwaite papers as well, and the Braithwaite magic book. But actually they don't know that actually the house and the ghost killed them and sent them down there to downstairs. They went into the elevator at the end of this tunnel as well, and they're like, oh shit, we could have just took the elevator down. Which I thought was a very ironic and funny scene. They enter the secret room. There is a cave here with a ship in it. That looked like it's been shipwrecked. And it immediately reminded me of the Goonies. And there are all these sort of dead indigenous people down there. There are indigenous mothers with their children, and still holding their skeletons are still holding their dead children. Letty sees a woman sitting at the top somewhere. And she's sort of face down and she's holding a scroll. Go and reach for it. The mummy comes alive. So at first we think that this is a woman because she has breasts. Then as she starts to, and then we find out that she is not necessarily woman or man. That she might be. I'm not sure if hermaphrodite is an offensive term. Yahim essentially says that Yahim is both man and woman, two spirits in one. We see that Yahim has both a penis and a vagina as well as breasts. I think we're supposed to take this as like also a transgender transformation as well. This is not only transformation in the sense that Yahim is transforming from mummy to person and live human being, but also transforming as like a allegory for a transgender transformation. You get this very offensive moment where Montrose says, "What are you?" Which is supposed to relate to the fact that Yahim is a mummy. We don't know if Yahim is alive or dead. Or somewhere in between, but also alluding to the fact that Yahim is both man and woman. And then Tick comes in right after that and sort of corrects and says, "Who are you?" And I really like that moment. I felt like we get of course I really hate the fact that people on Twitter are like, this was such a terrible moment. Montrose says, "What are you?" It's 1955. I don't know what people are. These people are not going to be woke. These people are not going to be quote unquote woke. These people are not going to be hypersensitive. But even still, we still get a correction. We get Montrose saying, "What are you?" Which is offensive because, this is not a thing. This is a person. And, Tick comes in and corrects it and says, "Who are you?" And Yahim explains who, Yahim is. Braithwaite used Yahim to sort of get what he wanted and sort of translate certain scrolls and ancient texts so that he could become even more powerful. Yahim doesn't really trust Tick as well because he has Braithwaite blood in him. And Tick is not responsible for his forefathers' sins, that Yahim just can't trust him. And this is where I started to get a little annoyed. This is where I started not to like messaging. The messaging up until this point was pretty good. And then we start getting into interactions with different groups of people of color, right? As we start getting into the messaging of Black Americans are also culpable in the oppression of other groups of color, and that our forefathers are white. And while that is technically true because of slavery, there is a false equivalency there. And the false equivalency is that somehow they are our forefathers because they raped us. Like I think that needs to be very clear. Like they are our forefathers because of rape. They are not our actual forefathers though. I think Tick actually says that we are not family though. We do get, they make it out, of course. They grab the scroll, they run out with Yahim to the elevator. Letty has to go and save the day again. We get this reoccurring theme of Letty actually saving the day. This is real women empowerment, like the scenes we get with Letty, not the scenes that we get with Christina. We see that Yahim has been cursed to a life as a siren. That Braithwaite put a hex on Yahim so that if Yahim ever, left from that cave, that Yahim wouldn't be able to talk, that Yahim would only be able to scream. Tick essentially says that his plan is to, get Yahim to sort of translate some more of the ancient texts, to get Yahim to trust him. But then we see the ending scene as Montrose slitting Yahim's throat. And that also felt like messaging as well. Again, going on with this message that Black Americans are culpable in the violence towards indigenous people. But are you going to talk about the fact that a lot of indigenous tribes are also culpable in the slave trade? Are you going to talk about the fact that they traded and sold and black slaves with white people? I live in North Carolina. Cherokee Nation was one of those tribes that also held black slaves and traded with white people slaves, and they were involved in this flesh trade here and chattel slavery also. It's just kind of like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck just happened here? Like, it's just like, what in the world? Like, I just didn't understand how it went with his character. I didn't understand I just didn't get it. Hopefully it's explained further in the next episode. It felt like at the end when, Montrose splits Yahim's throat, that it feels like they just used Yahim as a prop. Like, Yahim really didn't get a character arc. Like, you just sort of threw this transgender, two-spirited, person in here who's also indigenous just to kill Yahim off. Like, it just doesn't, it's something about that ending scene I just didn't like. It sort of left a bad taste in my mouth. I didn't like it on multiple levels. If it's a history of violence, let's talk about how other people of color have also been very culpable in the violence against black people, how immigrant groups have been culpable in the violence of black people, how indigenous groups, indigenous tribes have been culpable in the violence of black people. It's like, black people have been fighting. We've been in the belly of the beast. We've been fighting in the belly of the beast against white racism for a very long time, and also advocating for other groups. We have a rich history of not only advocating for ourselves, but advocating for other groups also. And to just I don't like the false equivalency that just because we are linked to white people because of the oppression that we face to them, that we have faced at the hands of them, that means that we are them, when we have been one of the only groups, one of the few groups that have not only cared about, talking about our issues, but also talking about other people's issues as well. I mean, we talk about Muhammad Ali talking about how he's not going to go fight in a white man's war. To sort of have this episode where it's almost like, no, black people have been trying to get on the backs of other people of color. But that's not true. Have you not heard of Fred Hampton? How he put together a rainbow coalition of black, brown, and Asian people? Like, what the fuck? Like, I don't understand why we are painted in a way that is not true to the history of who we are as a people. We're the ones who created Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism came from American blacks. We thought that, you know, the diaspora needed to be united, even though the diaspora is not always united with us. But that's all I really gotta say about this episode, y'all. Leave your comments under the comment section below about what you thought about this episode, what you thought about my analysis of the episode, what you thought about that ending at the end of the episode of Montrose, you know, slitting Yahim's throat. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see y'all next time for the next video, and for the next, you know, installment of Lovecraft Country. Out.